darker than blue. Don't let us hang around this town and let what others say come true. We're just good for nothing. They all figure a boy should roll up his jigger.
Good evening, everyone listening, dear listeners, here on WPFW 89.3. I am Jackie Lukman, and you are listening to Darker Than Blue, the show here on WPFW, where we talk about politics for the people who are, as Curtis Mayfield just sung it, people who are darker than blue. That's us, that's me, that's you, and thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I know that today was pretty interesting for a lot of us because we are at the close or close to the end of, not at the actual close, but we are close to the end of a one-day boycott that someone called for today. Honestly, I am not sure who called for the boycott because there were several flyers going around calling for the boycott, emails, social media posts. These calls seem to come from several places. All of the calls came from flyers shared around online. What I noticed about the calls for this boycott were a few things that I have been raising over the past week or so, ever since the first flyers came around, started being shared around. And one of the things I noticed was that there were few demands articulated, which is kind of not usual in protest actions. But that's one of the things I noticed. There were few demands articulated, if any. And of course, the big thing I noticed was that in most of the flyers, you kind of couldn't tell who was the organization calling for it. A lot of the flyers didn't have an organization that was calling for anything. So you couldn't tell who was really calling for this boycott. Several of the flyers said that the boycott's goal was to make a point, but the point, I have not seen that the point that was trying to be made was clear. But then on the other side of the spectrum, y'all, there were also people who are dismissing or who are worse, denigrating the boycott. And I don't think that's a good idea either and people are doing this because the boycott is just one day, just today. But most of the negativity about the boycotts that people have is because of the observations that people made, which are not inaccurate, that people will just buy what they need the day before and the day after the boycott. So people have been saying, what difference does it make if you withhold your dollars for one day, but you already spent them the day before and you're going to spend them the day after with the same companies that you boycotted? Do you know what I mean? So it doesn't actually do anything. That's what people are saying. And okay, look, I think there is some validity in those criticisms, even though I would not go so far as to completely condemn or disparage or denigrate a boycott. And I think there is validity in a boycott, right? Boycotts are fine. I'm not opposed to boycotts. I've just been saying what others have said about the goals or lack of well-articulated goals. What the purpose of the boycott is, not clear. And if a change in society is what people want, if that is why people are boycotting, they want to push some element of this society to do something different in response to something that they just did that people aren't happy with, then I think that we're going to have to do more than a boycott. And that seems to be the thing that people don't want to do more than this, right? Which is weird to me. And listen, I understand because I peruse the social media streets and I read people's comments, and I try not to get angry at people's comments because I swear, y'all, I swear, dear listeners, I think people get on social media, they turn their computers on, they get on social media, and they drop their brain in the trash can next to their desk. as soon as they turn on social media, because some of the things that people are saying about boycotts in general, some of the history, completely wrong, or they just don't know the history. Or, people are saying things like, well, this is the first thing that people are getting involved in organizing with. This is like the entryway into organizing for a lot of people. So this is how people learn how to, and I have to say, I have to push back on that. An unorganized effort is not how people learn to be organized. That's not how this works. And I am not saying that a boycott is a bad idea. I just think if we're going to do any mass action, if we are expecting mass action, if that's what we want, mass action to facilitate a change of any significance in society that impacts the most of the masses, then this kind of a boycott is not what moves that needle. And I'm not saying that. I want you all to understand what I am saying. I am not saying that boycott is a bad idea. I'm not saying that I'm opposed to this boycott. I didn't spend any money, but I didn't spend any money because I'm broke. I don't have any money. So that was really easy for me to do, not spend any money. It's really easy to boycott when you're broke anyway, right? But there is a level of organization, and not even a level of organization. There was no organization with this boycott. Putting out a call on social media for people to do something, that's not organization. Now that's a call to action, but it's not organization. And even a call to action is kind of insufficient if you have not well laid out what the action is, what it is not, what the intention of the action is, who the target is, and how you expect people to carry out the action, right? But I think that the response that people have had to this boycott, and believing that it is an entryway into organizing for people, is very weird to me, because haven't people been calling for boycotts for years for different things that people didn't participate in? Like I distinctly remember trans and queer people saying, stop buying Chick-fil-A, because the owners of Chick-fil-A take the money that you give them when you buy those dry chicken sandwiches, and they give that money, part of the money that you give Chick-fil-A when you go on Saturdays and Fridays, they take that money and they give it to anti-gay, anti-trans organizations. So they've been asking us to stay away from Chick-fil-A for years, and y'all keep going. Y'all did not pay any attention to that boycott. We just had an experience with what I had been kind of calling it, a South African apartheid opposition moment, where Palestinians reminded us of the BDS movement, the boycott, divest, and sanctions movement that began with the fight against apartheid in South Africa. And the call was to boycott, divest from, and sanction. Boycott South African businesses and products that they ship around the world at the time, divest from South Africa as a government and South African businesses, and sanction the government of South Africa, right? That was the BDS movement, and that's where it got started. Now BDS has been, I won't say adopted, but now BDS is focused on freeing Palestine, ending apartheid in Palestine, and it focuses on the same thing. So they have a list. They have a list of companies that are either heavily invested in the Israeli government or Israeli themselves, and they've asked us to boycott those companies, the big ones: Starbucks, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, I think PepsiCo, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Burger King, all the fast food, yes, all of they asked us to boycott Marvel movies, because Marvel decided at the last minute, right before they wrapped production of the latest Captain America with Anthony Mackie, that all the Black folks want to get behind, because Anthony Mackie is the new Captain America, and I'm just celebrating a Black man being Captain America is a weird flex to me. But that's, I digress. I got to stay on track. But they asked us to boycott Marvel movies, especially the new Captain America, because at the last minute, Marvel decided to reintroduce this Zionist character into the movie that was not in the movie before. Come on now. And they asked us, please don't watch this new Captain America movie, because they didn't have to put that Zionist character back in there that wasn't in there before. And they did. And did we? Did y'all? Didn't y'all watch that movie? Yes, you did. And you talking about what? Let's make Captain America more successful at the box office than it was last week because Captain America is Black. So listen, I have no problem with boycotts. I just don't understand the enthusiasm behind this boycott when other boycotts have been called that had clear demands, that had a clear purpose, that had clearly identified targets, and we didn't support those at all. And we, the people who were directly impacted in a deeply negative way by the entities that we were asked to boycott, we see it all the time. And we're still in that. The line at Chick-fil-A is still around the block on Saturdays, because they close on Sundays, and that's supposed to be such a wonderful thing. But they're still homophobes and transphobes. Y'all still going to see that Captain America movie, despite the genocide and the Zionism in it. That just okay. So there's a weird kind of two sides to the whole boycott phenomenon in this country of late that I'm noticing when we're talking about this particular boycott. But it's also very weird to me, dear listeners, that when people say that a lot of people have never organized before, and this boycott is people's first introduction to organizing, I don't buy that. I really don't buy that, because we have been talking about the need to organize against this entire system for decades. And I know a lot of people have not been alive that long, but for those of you who have been politically aware, or at least engaged to some extent, since 2016, and I'm using 2016 as a modern marker of mass political engagement, because that is when Bernie Sanders started saying the S word, socialism, even though he's not an actual socialist, but he did start speaking to progressive policies, progressivism, that had not been spoken to in the political arena in this country for decades, that did ignite the imagination, or at least the interest, of new generations, younger generations of people who started to think about the S word. Oh, well, if capitalism allows the kind of exploitation that I am suffering from, then maybe I do want socialism. And I think that is a connection the people made that Bernie Sanders himself did not make, because Sanders was not up there advocating for socialism. He wasn't. He was advocating for Democrats. Come on now, let's be real about Bernie Sanders. He was not moving people toward Marxism and socialism. No, he wasn't. Bernie Sanders is solidly liberal. And he was arguing for a return to a more genteel type of liberalism, not socialism for the people, not people-centered human rights, just less overt oppression, while the capitalists can still make their money, right? So I feel like people got involved in politics at that point in 2016 because of Bernie Sanders. And then that's a whole nother conversation now. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole on this show, but we're going to have to go down that rabbit hole on some show, because this whole the argument about Bernie Sanders being the rebel. Woo, don't get me started. I digress again. Let me get back on track. So the problem I think I have with that argument is that I don't think people have matured. I don't think a lot of people, or I don't think enough people who became engaged in politics through that route, through the Bernie Sanders route, have matured beyond that narrow analysis of politics and the people's place in politics, if you see what I mean. I am saying that people are still very much in the we have to do something to make this system less brutal. We have to do something to make this system more fair. We have to do something to make this system more equitable, instead of realizing that this system has never been any of those things. It was never designed to be those things. It is operating exactly the way it was designed to operate, so that we, the people, do not actually benefit. And if we want to change that, we must change this system. We're not at a reform moment, and people are responding as if reform is going to solve this problem that people are confronted with, and it's just not. Because I think that it's weird to me that people are calling what Trump is doing now an administrative coup, and I'm not saying that it's not, y'all. I'm just trying to make this point. Bear with me. If people are calling what he's doing an administrative coup, is our answer to what people are calling a coup of any kind, is the answer to that a boycott? Is that how we think we're going to get any of this to stop? This everything that Trump is doing that's not economic in nature. Are we going to stop any of that by not buying things? Do we and I kind of had to, as I'm thinking of this, as I was thinking kind of through this, how I'm going to have this conversation without being condescending and patronizing, right? And without sounding like I'm denigrating people for wanting to do this boycott, but trying to have this conversation in a way that hopefully people understand what the issue with this situation is. I started to think of, wait, do we not understand what the word coup means? Because we use it a lot. And the empire uses it to describe people's movements against undemocratic repression. And when the people overthrow a puppet government that has been installed by the imperialist neocolonial powers to control them and deny them freedom, when the people take over and run those governments out of their countries, the US and its allies call that a coup. But that's not what that is. That is a people's revolution against oppression. And then we need to be clear on what these things mean. So, what does a coup mean then? A coup is a sudden, decisive exercise of force in politics, and especially the violent overthrow or alteration of an existing government by a small group. A coup is an exercise of force in politics, not in economics. Target is not fomenting a coup. Walmart is not fomenting it. Now, do Walmart and Target CEOs heavily influence and practically control the US government? Yes, they do. That is why we don't live in a democracy. We live in a kleptocracy, because they are stealing our resources through their control of the government. The government governs, the government governs on behalf of the corporations. So the corporations can make more money off of exploiting us. That's how this government works. We live in a kleptocracy, not a democracy. So, okay, let's go. We're talking about an exercise of force in politics. So, is our response to an exercise of force in politics an economic response? Is that what we're saying? Because Trump is in the midst of expanding power by challenging the boundaries of existing executive authority. That's what I think he's doing. And he's challenging the boundaries of existing executive authority by issuing a bunch of executive orders and demands that he knows are barely legal, if at all legal, only to have as many of them as possible end up in front of the Supreme Court, where he expects to win some. That he knows he's going to lose some of these, and he has already lost several of these court challenges to his executive orders. But he has won a few, and he expects to win a few in the Supreme Court. That's what I think he's doing. And of course, he is lining his pockets, him and his friends' pockets. This is all a big revenge, a revenge fantasy being played. It is the white American male revenge fantasy played out at the highest levels of every white man revenge movie you have ever seen. That is what you are watching in the White House right now. And you're watching the white male revenge movie coupled with the white male heist movie, because that's what Elon Musk is doing. He's just in there stealing stuff. That's it. So this is what is going on right now. And I will never not say that Trump would not be having an easy of a time doing this had he not used legal and procedural infrastructure established by Democrats who were or have done the same things that Trump is doing. They just did it in a nicer way, or they just didn't tell you they were doing it. What I think is really at the foundation of what, like the societal confusion, or the confusion among the masses about what the response to what is going on really should be here, I think it goes back to the fact that Americans are ill-equipped to respond to what Trump is doing now. People are unprepared in regard to what to do now, because people didn't see any reason to respond to anything that Biden Harris were doing that was just as horrible. Because remember when we told y'all about Biden deporting millions of people? He did, and you didn't care. Biden did not stop those cuts to those COVID era SNAP and Medicaid expansion programs, even though those two program expansions alone improved life for millions of poor people, especially children. Biden and Harris didn't fight to keep those, and y'all didn't do anything. Biden and Harris armed a genocide, and punished everybody who called it that and criticized them for doing it. Biden and Harris trampled on dozens of environmental regulations to approve permits to build another section of the border wall. Biden and Harris prosecuted Black organizers and their allies for conspiring to act as agents of Russia. Biden and Harris said that the police didn't need to be defunded because of their rampant abuses, but they needed to be funded. And cop cities became a thing. Biden and Harris oversaw the repression, criminalization, and even murder of Stop Cop City protesters. Y'all didn't care. Y'all didn't do anything. Where were most Americans in opposing any of that and more under Democrats? Well, y'all were at home. You were at brunch, not caring that Democrats were violating people's human and alleged constitutional rights. So, of course, Now you have no idea what to do now that you think a real threat exists. But those of us who have been on the receiving end of Biden and Harris's and Obama and Biden's and Clinton and what was his name, Gore's, those of us who have been on the receiving end of liberal oppression, y'all acted like it didn't happen. And we were screaming then at you to tell you now is the time to organize. Because when these people leave, if you can easily ignore what these people are doing. But when the next folks come in, they're just going to keep doing this, but it's just going to get worse. And it happens. And here we are yet again. And now people are panicking, but in their panic, they go to a boycott. And people keep saying things like a general strike, but we don't know how to carry out a general strike. We don't know what goes into organizing a general strike. We don't know what a general strike looks like because we're not organized in this country. So now people are either scrambling, trying to do anything, but having no experience or knowledge on what to do or how, or people are just trying to hide, hoping that it all goes away in 4 years and they'll be okay if they just keep their heads down. Because like I said, dear listeners, in America, we are indoctrinated to do nothing but this. But I have noticed in my little limited travels and in my, reading everything from everywhere, this is not the case in other countries. And I'm going to give you an example today. South Koreans, just a few months ago, reversed a martial law decree in just 6 hours. And that, I think, shows how ordinary citizens and politicians, that's the key right there, can take fast action to uphold democracy. Now, this is not something I am making up. This is from a publication called Waging Nonviolence, People-Powered News and Analysis. And you can go to the website Waging Nonviolence, WAGINGNONVIOLENCE.org, exactly how it's spelled, Waging Nonviolence, and read this analysis called What the U.S. Can Learn from South Koreans Who Stopped an Authoritarian Power Grab. I'm not making this up. I'm literally going to read this article to you and have a little bit of commentary in between to make some points that I hope you understand. The author of this article is someone named Junmin Choi. And Junmin says that as Elon Musk and his Doge team set about dismantling government agencies, many Americans expected a strong response from congressional Democrats. Instead, party leaders offered weak statements and little resistance to being refused entry to the very agencies they are tasked with overseeing. This lack of urgency amid what's being called an administrative coup stoked a wave of angry calls to do more. In their outrage on social media, many pointed to decisive action taken by politicians in other countries facing crisis. For example, someone on Blue Sky noted that, quote, South Korean politicians were literally scaling fences to protect their government, while our senators are sending out pre-scheduled tweets about the Super Bowl, end quote. This is from the article. I'm not saying this. This is the observation of a South Korean anti-imperialist who is in an organization. But let's go on. South Korea is a particularly apt example in this context. After all, something incredible happened there 2 months ago, and it could be just the kind of inspiration America needs to turn the tide on the Trump administration's dangerous power grab. What happened in South Korea 2 months ago? Well, on December 3rd at 10:23 p.m., South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol unexpectedly declared nationwide martial law, citing the need to eliminate, listen to this now, pro-North Korean elements and anti-state forces, anti-imperialists, and communists. or people they suspect to be communists because they're Koreans and they support the reunification of the Korean peninsula that was partitioned due to an imperialist war. That's another conversation we're going to have for another day. But let's go on. He then established martial law command, mobilized troops, and stripped citizens of their fundamental political and social rights. This man did all this in South Korea at practically 10:30 at night on December 3rd. This included prohibiting all political activities by the National Assembly and political parties, control over press and publication freedoms, a ban on strikes, slowdowns, and assemblies, and the ability to arrest and detain anyone without judicial procedures or warrants. Sound familiar? The last time martial law was declared in South Korea was in 1979, following the assassination of then President Park Chung-hee. However, what happened in December 2024 would be considered a self-coup, where an incumbent president takes actions to acquire or demand greater power while in office. And no South Korean president has done that since October 1972. The martial law situation came to an abrupt end when the National Assembly passed a resolution demanding its withdrawal on December 4th at 1:01 a.m. The politicians were at home in bed and they got news. Your president did some messed up stuff. And well, actually, most of them were not in bed. They were actually at the National Assembly waiting for. We're going to get into this. Okay. So in response, martial law forces gradually withdrew from the National Assembly building. The presidential office announced the lifting of martial law at 4:26 a.m. and it was formally rescinded through a cabinet council resolution 4 minutes later, effectively terminating the entire episode within about 6 hours. Subsequently, a national movement demanding both the Yoon Suk Yeol administration's resignation and comprehensive social reform was initiated nationwide. They didn't do that through social media, y'all. They did not do that just through social media. But okay, well, we're going to get into how. President Yoon is currently under detention to this day and indictment, while simultaneously facing impeachment proceedings. Many high-ranking officials from the Yoon administration have either resigned or been impeached, and numerous general-grade officers involved in the incident have been detained. There were many reasons that the self-coup failed, including command confusion due to the extremely small number of personnel involved in planning the attempt. However, none of these factors could have halted the coup without civilian action. Here are 4 key lessons from this movement that contributed to their victory in South Korea. Number 1, take action commensurate with the threat and move quickly. I shall repeat it. Take action that is at the level of the threat and move quickly. That's what commensurate means. The South Korean Constitution explicitly states that when the majority of the National Assembly requests that martial law be lifted, the president must comply. After martial law was declared, civil society activists shared information about the police blockade of the National Assembly and the possibility of MPs being arrested, calling for the people to gather at the assembly. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the overthrow of the coup against Hugo Chavez in Venezuela in 2000? Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that one day at another time too, because that was a big old another response to an attempted coup that was only successful because of the power of the people and the people's communication networks. But that's going to have to be another day. But you can look that up. Look up the coup against Hugo Chavez in Venezuela in 2000. Yeah. So as activists arrived at the National Assembly in South Korea, they began live streaming the situation outside the assembly via social media. The opposition leader also initiated a live stream from his car while heading to the assembly, appealing to supporters to gather. Over 16,000 people assembled outside the National Assembly that night. They arrived before the martial law forces, armored vehicles, and helicopters, helping the MPs scale the walls of the blockaded assembly building. Let's make this clear. The MPs hear about the president issuing martial law. Those who were not close to or still in the National Assembly had to get to the National Assembly to stop him. The military, the military law forces had already blockaded the National Assembly, but 16,000 South Koreans showed up in the middle of the night to stop the administrative coup and helped the politicians who also came to stop the coup scale the walls to get into the National Assembly that the military was blocking. Oh my gosh, come on. Let me. Those who arrived by taxi reported that the taxi drivers did not take their money for the fares, because the taxi drivers were like, oh, you're going to stop the coup? Well, let me just make sure you get there. No, I don't want your money. Just do your duty for the people. Citizens blocking military vehicles advanced toward the National Assembly. Elderly citizens stated that they came. I don't know how I'm going to keep my emotions in check reading it. Elderly citizens stated they came thinking that they had lived long enough and they should take bullets instead of the young if the military opened fire. Come on now. Every time I say we elders in the movement have a responsibility to stand in between the state and our people, this is what I mean. We understand, and we have to understand, that it just might come to this. And I kind of figure that a lot of the elders that I organize with, a lot of us, we will be on that front line together, and none of us will ever have to say anything to each other, because this is exactly how we all feel. We understand that the work we are doing, we may not see the fruits of, but you will. So we are happy, honored, proud to stand between you and the forces we are fighting, to give you a little bit of space to go a little bit farther than we did. Come on now. Woo, let me keep going. Young people reported standing in front of tanks with their bare hands, thinking that they wouldn't actually shoot. Now, I got to say, young people can be very energetic, and that's wonderful, but be careful with the idealism, because stop thinking that the military won't shoot at you. We live in this United Snakes of America. We know this military will shoot at us. In other countries, that's a different kind of, in some other countries, that's a different phenomenon because of the way those countries developed in a different way from the way this country and its military developed. And I'm going to try to get to that in a minute, but it's a little past 30 minutes past the hour, and it is time for a WPFW station break. So, producer extraordinaire, what announcements do we have today?
On Saturday, March 8th, beginning at midnight for 24 hours, WPFW presents One Heart, One Fight, One Sisterhood, visioning justice, freedom, peace, and security for the women of the world, in commemoration of International Women's Day. The programming will center the voices of women and girls protecting their communities and resisting imperialism, racism, xenophobia, and homophobia across the globe. That's One Heart, One Fight, One Sisterhood, visioning justice, freedom, peace, and security for the women of the world. Saturday, March 8th, beginning at midnight. WPFW, building a better world, one broadcast at a time.
Real quick, I want to thank you all, dear listeners, for your support during the recent pledge drive. I appreciate you so much, and everybody here at WPFW appreciates you all so much, because it is because of your support that we met our goal and we are still on the air. So thank you so much. And I got to say, I love WPFW's music programming that is so incredibly representative of so many different cultures. You get to, if you listen to WPFW throughout the week, from the time you get up in the morning to the time you go to bed, whenever that is, you will have heard various political opinions all across the spectrum. You will have heard from communities of people that you probably hadn't even thought about. And you will also hear incredible cultural offerings and music. You'll hear from not just musicians from all over the world, but poets, authors. You'll hear about filmmakers talking about their movies and their art. WPFW is a treasure. And Friday nights on WPFW, if you like music, you better stick around and listen to the Friday evening programming after News Views that comes on right after this show with my comrade and friend Garland Nixon. WPFW is where you want to be on Friday nights if you like to cut a rug and get your groove on after you've learned some really, really great political stuff. So let's get back to the really, really great political stuff. Let's talk about the youth and the citizens and how they stopped this administrative coup. They stood against armored vehicles and buses carrying martial law troops with nothing but their bodies, while recording and transmitting footage in real time through social media. See, this is when social media becomes useful. Most citizens who rushed to the assembly had no knowledge of nonviolent direct action or nonviolence training, yet instinctively grasped what was most crucial. Why was that? Why do people who this author is saying had no particular training in nonviolent response, how did they instinctively know to just show up and protect their society from what they understood was an illegal power grab? Because their society developed in a way that collective struggle against imperialism was necessary for their survival. People in other countries that have been victims of European colonialism, European neocolonialism, and now US-driven imperialism have had to collectively struggle against those forces for decades, while we in this country have been indoctrinated to believe that all of these people in these other countries waging armed struggle against US-backed forces, we were told that those people were communists and they hated democracy, and they were fighting US forces because they were trying to destroy the United States. And the United States was coming to bring democracy to these countries. Well, no, those people were fighting against US imperialism, Western colonialism, and neocolonialism, imposing capitalist dictatorship and repression on their societies. So they had to fight those things together, collectively, as a unified society in order to survive. So a lot of the culture of these other countries like South Korea, countries like Venezuela, countries like Cuba, countries like Nicaragua, the countries in the global South that are struggling right now, El Salvador, Ecuador, Peru, all of them, all of these countries, all the countries on the continent of Africa that have been waging war against colonialism and now neocolonialism. They have had to collectively fight outside forces that were trying to impose an economic and social order upon them that would strip them of their human rights and subject them to a lifetime of exploitation, poverty, and abuse. And they didn't want that, so they took up arms. Now, first, they tried to reason with these people. They did in just about every instance. They did what we do. They protest peacefully. They tried to work within the system. They tried to talk to the leading politicians and explain the pain of the people. They tried to negotiate. They tried reform. And once people in these countries realized these imperialists, these colonialists, these neo-colonialists are psychopaths, they really just want to use us up to make as much money off of stealing our resources as they can while not giving us anything. And if we die in the process, they don't care. And if they have to kill us in the process of getting us out of the way so they can get to our resources, they will do it. So we are going to have to stop them to protect our country, our resources, and our lives. That is what was really going on in these armed struggles in these countries around the world. That this government was telling us, well, these people are just a bunch of wild-eyed, godless communists who want to eventually invade the United States and overthrow our godly, shining city on a hill democracy, when it was this country that was behind the attempted destabilizations and resource thefts of these countries. So people in other countries have a very recent, but also pretty long history of organized struggle against outside and undemocratic forces. We do not have that experience in this country outside of specific groups of people. Do you see where I'm going? I hope you do. You should have been there before I got here. But in case you're not, in case you're still kind of wondering, where exactly are we? Africans in this country, those of us who are descended from the people who were trafficked here from the motherland, from the continent of Africa, we, our indigenous relatives who were here before everybody got here, and immigrants who came in waves after that and were initially treated as others, people involved in the labor movement in this country during the industrial phase of capitalism, during the earlier phases of capitalism, when it could have been brought to heel if people did not succumb so easily to the repression of not only the US government, but of the corporate forces themselves, hiring their own militias to beat the heck out of labor organizers and workers. Every instance of organizing that people have engaged in this country has not only been brutally repressed by this government, but it has also been brutally repressed by the capitalist forces that control this government. And those forces propagandize the rest of the country against those forces. In other countries where the history of people's struggle are celebrated by the people, especially when they won, especially when they have been able to kick the colonists, the neo-colonialists, or the imperialists out. And yes, they're still having to protect their revolutions from those forces, still wanting to exploit them, but they celebrate the people's victory over repression and for freedom. We don't do that in this country. There is no celebration of organized struggle in this country because it is not taught in public school. The history of the labor struggle, the history of the importance of interracial, intergenerational, multicultural labor organizing that wasn't just focused on labor issues, but it was also focused on anti-militarism, because anti-militarism was connected to worker exploitation and economic deprivation in the early years of the labor movement in this country. And the capitalists didn't want that happening because war made them money. So they didn't want to pay workers. what they were worth, didn't want to give workers the benefits they were demanding that they deserved. And then they really got angry when the workers started saying, you know what? You treat us like garbage. And I notice how you treat Black workers. You treat them worse than you treat us. You treat all workers bad, but you treat Black workers like they're workers too. We're not putting up with you treating them like that. So you had a few white workers who were organizing, who said, why are we not organizing with Black workers? Now, most white workers did not say that because a lot of labor unions were segregated. But there were labor movements in this country that not only were integrated, but they were integrated on purpose. IWW was the main one. Look them up, IWW, and look up who Big Ben Fletcher was and how important that man was to labor organizing. But we have a history. We have a history of people struggle in this country. We don't know we have a history of people struggle in this country because the people who crushed those movements, the people who created COINTELPRO to destroy the Black Power movement, the people who negotiated down the efficacy and the enforcement of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act and the Housing Rights Act and the equal education, the equal access to education, all of those laws that came from the Civil Rights Movement. You do know that American politicians on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, negotiated to make those pieces of legislation as not that impactful as they could have been, and they certainly agreed not to enforce much of anything. That is why we're still having to fight for rights that we supposedly want. Because once the politicians got to it, the politicians turned the people's demands into some liberal political thing. But we don't even talk about these things in the history of people's struggles in this country because we have been indoctrinated to disrespect that history, to look at the people who were engaged in that struggle as if they were a bunch of communist agitators who also hate democracy. That's why all those Black folks were so angry. That's why all those students were so angry. They're a bunch of long-haired hippie communists who hate America. It wasn't that those students did not want to get drafted and go fight a war to kill people who had never done anything to them. No, that couldn't have been, even though that's exactly what those students said during those protests against the Vietnam War. The government's response was to characterize those actions and every action like it carried out by the people against the repression of this government as disaffected, angry U.S. citizens who have been influenced by a foreign communist power. And that has been the government's response to organization and organizers among the people in this country forever. So I want people, as we wrap up here on Darker Than Blue, and we'll spend a little bit more time over on Black Liberation Media in the dark room on this. But as we wrap up here on Darker Than Blue, I want you all to understand what I am saying. This being a boycott, that's not the problem. That's not the issue. Okay, it's a boycott. You participated in your first boycott, some of you. Fantastic. Good for you. I'm glad you did. Now what? Now what? Now that you didn't spend any money today, or you didn't do anything on Zoom or whatever, now that this action, whatever it is, whatever it produced, whatever it did is done, what is your next step? What is it that you want? What do you want your next step to produce? Ultimately, what do you want these actions to do in regard to where you think this society is and where you want this society to go? And do you know what steps have to be taken to get from point A to point B. If you don't, then you need to be in an organization. And I know the question is always, what organization do we join? We just don't know which organizations to join. Okay, I'm going to make this easy for you. There is the Black Alliance for Peace. Go to blackallianceforpeace.com, exactly how it's spelled, blackallianceforpeace.com. Go to Pan-African Community Action, Pan-African Community Action, or pacapower.org, PACA power.org. Go to the All African People's Revolutionary Party at AAPRP-INTL.org. Friends of the Congo, Palestinian Youth Movement, Students for Justice in Palestine, Afro Resistance. Start a social justice focused organization or committee in your church or your school. My church, Plymouth United Church of Christ, Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ, has the Board of Social Action. What does your church have? If your church, the church doesn't have that kind of an organization, start one. Start one. We have to build the community that we want. We're not going to get it done through just boycotts, y'all. You have to be organized to do it, because we need to answer the question that Dr. King asked when he wrote in his book, Chaos or Community. Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here, y'all? And how do we get there? If you think we're going to get there through an economic boycott, I am telling you, you are going to find yourself exactly where you are today 4 years from now. But that's all the time we have here for Darker Than Blue. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Stick around, y'all, on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever else you are on Black Liberation Media for the Dark Room. A luta continua. The struggle continues, but if we keep fighting, y'all, and if we get organized, I promise, Victoria Acerta, victory is certain. Peace.
Don't let us hang around this town and let what others say come true.
All right, though. Let me see. I got to keep my... Oh, hold on. Can you hear me now? Oh, no. Let's see. I may have to. All right. I think I may have to do this. Okay, now you can hear me. Fantastic. Good. Okay, now I'm going to put that back there. All right, good. Okay. Weird. All right, sorry about that. So, sounds good now. Good. Okay. So let's finish up with this article, because I really want us to get into what they did in South Korea and why this whole one-day boycott thing that people got all excited about here, why that's just bullshit. It's just okay. Let me see. Let me scroll down. Okay. So we stopped at the youth who blocked. Let me go back to this, because this is really good. Young people reported standing in front of tanks with their bare hands, thinking they wouldn't actually shoot. They stood against armored vehicles and buses carrying martial law troops with nothing but their bodies, while recording and transmitting footage in real time through social media. Most citizens who rushed to the assembly had no knowledge of nonviolent direct action or nonviolence training, yet instinctively grasped what was most crucial. MPs, weren't the only ones scaling the assembly walls that night, Parliamentary aides and staffers also climbed over with citizens' assistance. All the politicians who the president and his minions tried to keep out of the National Assembly, they got in because the people helped scoot them over the wall to get. While citizens outside surrounded and blocked tanks, armored vehicles, and buses, helicopters landed inside the assembly grounds. Parliamentary aides defended the main assembly building after being helped over the wall by the people, constructing barricades with furniture at the entrances and using fire extinguishers to repel martial law forces who broke through the windows. Well, hold up. Wait a minute. This is something straight from a movie. I feel like let's get a little closer so we can really. This is something straight from a Korean action movie. You got military forces breaking into the assembly where the staff and the MPs have barricaded themselves inside the assembly to keep a coup from happening. And the military, the martial law forces are breaking into the assembly or trying to break into the assembly. And the people inside that them barricaded them inside, they done took the fire extinguishers because that's all they had. They got the fire extinguishers and they like, get the fuck away from the window. You shh. Come on now. What did American politicians do? What did they do? They went to the Treasury building, and they had their angry faces on, and they are saying very strenuous things to the little skinny white dude who was standing outside the door. Dude was, if he was a $1.25 soaking wet, I would be surprised. But these 5, 6, however many of them it was, U.S. politicians, all they didn't move that man. They did not make a move to make him move. They stood there and they had words with him. Meanwhile, the folks in South Korea are assaulting the coup forces, repelling them with fire extinguishers. Oh my gosh. Assembly staffers prioritized protecting the generator because they think, since modern parliamentary voting requires electricity. Ultimately, the martial law troops failed to occupy the main parliamentary chamber due to resistance mounted by citizens, parliamentary security personnel, and legislative staff, including lawmakers' aides. So every time in the last couple of weeks, I said, how is it that these folks are getting no resistance from anybody in any of these agencies? This is the kind of stuff I was talking about. But these people get into these buildings, how do they stay? I don't care if Trump did fire the top aide. Because of what we're going to talk about in a minute, I'm even more angry at people who are like, oh, I'm afraid. Oh, so what? What they did was illegal. They had no legal authority to fire anybody. But as soon as they said, oh, I fire you, y'all just packed up your shit and left. So is it a coup if they didn't actually make you do anything? You just did it because they said so? I don't think that's a coup. I think you collaborated with them. I think you just obeyed. Let's get to number 2. Number 2, the second most important thing to know from what happened in South Korea is that the people encouraged defections from security forces. Also reminds me of what happened in Venezuela in 2000. But anyway, A common testimony from citizens who had confronted martial law forces that night was their open or subtle resistance to the coup attempt. Then he's talking about the martial law forces, the military and the police who were called on to carry out martial law. The reason they really didn't was because they either openly resisted or they were like, I don't know if this is legal. I don't know if I want to be a part of this or not. I'm just going to stand here. Nope. The article says they didn't forcefully enter the National Assembly by actively repelling citizens gathering in front of the parliament, and did not forcibly remove resisting aides from the assembly building. Now, remember, a small contingent of martial law forces got into the National Assembly compound via helicopter because the people outside, 16,000 of them, blocked the buses and the tanks from getting to the National Assembly. So the small forces of martial law folks who tried to break into the National Assembly, into the chamber, couldn't because the politicians and their aides and the staff inside the chamber barricaded the door so they couldn't get in. So aside from that, then the military that was there, that was supposed to carry out the martial law orders, they didn't. Why didn't they? When they were ordered to seize the servers of the National Election Commission, the literal servers that hold the voting data, they delayed. They just didn't do it. They went and had lunch. I'm not lying. I'm going to give you the link to this article so you can read it yourself. The author says that the soldiers who were ordered to seize the servers for the election commission did not do it. They delayed by eating instant ramen, by eating instant noodles at a convenience store nearby. That is literally what the article says. And when the president's arrest warrant was executed, Presidential Security Service officers either took leave or remained in standby areas, disobeying the security service chief's orders, leading to the president's arrest. They didn't help with her. They were just like, we're not doing this. We're not doing this at all. Nope. We're just gonna sit here because this ain't right. It's important to note here that the military in this country cannot be expected to act this way in such a situation. That's why they're not doing anything right now. That's why the military in this country is not opposing anything that Trump, not even the Department of Defense. When that man just fired the Joint Chiefs of Staff and replaced it with some dude, and he actually doesn't have the authority to, okay? What does the military do? Have they risen up against it? Nope. We have centuries of history in this country of the military helping to repress and massacre people who oppose U.S. government oppression. It's important to note here that the military, the nature of the U.S. military in this country is not anything like the nature of the military in anybody else's country. Certainly not in a country that has been fighting imperialism. So this is one reason we have to be clear that what is able to be carried out as far as mobilizing a mass of people in other countries, this is one of the reasons why it can't happen here. It's not going to happen here right now. I hesitate to say that it cannot happen here because power of the people has the ability to do amazing, unexpected things. But right now, we need to understand the nature, the character of the people that make up these institutions that explain why they're not opposing what is happening now and why it's going to take us some time to get to the point that people in South Korea, and we may never get to that point, right? This is why when we analyze people's movements around the world, we anti-imperialists try to be careful not to say things like, this is how we do it. This is what it should do. We should do it this way. Well, we may not be able to do it that way for some very important reasons that we're going to talk about. Now, the article says that there are many reasons their military acted this way. It partly stemmed from the military command's secretive preparation and execution of the coup. The martial law troops apparently didn't know their destination until moments before boarding the military helicopters, which of course made them suspicious, and none received proper briefings. And they didn't like not knowing what it was they were going to do. The new generation of military personnel, because look, I know I'm always told don't call them kids, but look, y'all kids ain't gonna take a whole lot of shit from older folks without explanations. Y'all are not gonna be like, oh, you just gonna order me to go to this other place and shoot a bunch of people. A lot of y'all kids are gonna be like, no, why? Where our generation and older, we wouldn't have asked why. No, we're just because we're indoctrinated to obey authority. Y'all, not so much. And that's great. I'm so happy about that. Don't ever just accept anybody's orders and just do what people tell you to do. Keep questioning people in authority. When you are not sure about the legality or the morality of the orders you are being given. So they say that the new generation of military personnel raised after procedural democracy began taking root also possessed more civic consciousness than their predecessors. Y'all literally just know more than we do, or we did at the time. And this is what they are saying in South Korea. This younger generation of people in the military just know more about actual democracy than their predecessors did. And they have more of an understanding and they have more civic engagement than their predecessors did. And they're not going to, and because of those things, they are not going to blindly accept orders that they don't understand and that they think might not be right. So the article goes on to say they were capable of independently assessing that the situation by no means warranted martial law and thus would have been less receptive to orders to mobilize such force to stabilize social order under such circumstances. So again, y'all, U.S. soldiers are not inclined toward this way of thinking because U.S. public school systems do not foster, encourage, or develop critical thinking skills in students. Schools in the U.S. are designed to indoctrinate, to get kids to remember names, dates, and lies about American democracy, the thing that doesn't exist, while downplaying American violent dominance. When genocide, slavery, sexism, massacres, labor repression are normalized as a part of a democracy, but they're never discussed as the evils against human beings who have rights that they were and that they are, how can people in the military who got educated in this environment who are carrying out the denial of other people's rights, how are they supposed to know that that's what they're doing when they've been taught to believe that denying people's rights, massacres, repression, that's defending democracy? And people who complain about the way the government represses people who rise up against its repression, those people are communists and they're troublemakers and they're outside agitators. And they hate democracy just like their foreign bosses. That's what they think. And you know that's what they think. So I do not understand how people think that we're going to foster a general strike in a country in which most of the people do not belong to any organization, hate organization, don't want to belong to any organization. And you know damn well your military is going to kill you if you organize. As soon as anybody in this government said, shoot them troublesome motherfuckers right now. How do you think a general strike is going to happen in an environment like this? Where every time we tell people you need to join an organization, people come up with 15 reasons why they won't. How are people who come up in the system, who are indoctrinated, educated, propagandized in the system, how are they able to oppose unlawful orders when things that are normally not just unlawful but immoral are not ever presented to them in that way? Most of us come to the realization of how evil this system is well into adulthood. We don't even learn the things that this government has done to other countries in college. Killing Hope, the book. Wait a minute. Where is it? Hold on. I got to find. Excuse me. If this book, the filter is not letting me show it to. Here you go. There it is. There it is. If you have gotten to your senior year in high school and you have not read this book, you are indoctrinated and you need to fix it. You need to be unindoctrinated and you need to read this book. This book is dense. It is it's a lot of little words. This is not an easy read. It's not an easy read. I have not actually finished this book. I think, where's my latest? Yeah, about right here. I'm about right here in this book. So I haven't even entirely finished it. But this book, Killing Hope by William Bloom. You can see. This book basically chronicles the U.S. military and CIA interventions since World War II. If you have attended public school in this country and you have never heard of this book, you need to read it. Because if you've attended public school in this country, I know you've never heard of this book. I know you've never read this book. You need to read this book, especially if you are thinking of going into the military. If you are watching this right now and you're in the military, get William Bloom's Killing Hope, so you can have a clear understanding of what it is you are doing in the U.S. military. See, what Bloom outlines in this book gives us an insight into why members of the U.S. military are not going to respond the way South Koreans did. Because people in countries that have struggled against imperialism have that collective memory and understanding. And they are usually hyper-focused at protecting the societies that they have developed on the other side of imperialism after they won that battle. And they are not fitting to lose it again. So they're very wary about handing over their democracies that they fought for and won, handing it back over to an undemocratic force. And South Koreans understand that even though they're they have left and so-called right-leaning parties, they also understand that their government is deeply, deeply influenced by U.S. foreign policy. They know that, and they are absolutely opposed to any moves by any representative in their government that appears to bring their country closer to U.S. control. So the struggle in South Korea against imperialism is it's almost continuously going on, because they're also opposing U.S. attacks against North Korea, because there is a North and South Korea because of U.S. imperialism, right? So we need to understand what it is the U.S. military does, and by extension, we would understand what the U.S. law enforcement does, every level of U.S. law enforcement. And books like Killing Hope help us understand the character and the nature and the reason for the existence of the US military and the people in it. So we need to understand that what people understand about the US military and what the US does around the world with the military, that explains why the military has always been used to crush people's movements in this country. When have they opposed? When have you seen members of the US military oppose using tanks and sniper rifles against US citizens? When have you seen them oppose using declaring martial law in US citizens, mostly working class and poor US citizens, where people have risen up against another oppression against them by the government? When have you ever seen the US military, National Guard, or law enforcement? When have you ever seen them oppose repressing citizens' uprisings, people's uprisings against oppression in this country? What happened in South Korea with the military? That's not going to happen in this country with these people. Not now. Sometime in the future, maybe under specific conditions, but now, no, it's not going to happen unless we change the way we organize. So in South Korea, ordinary citizens actively encouraged soldiers to defect or to not follow unlawful orders. But we know that the members of the military in this country, they're messed up. And we are right to be afraid to engage with them because we've seen how they act. This is the military in this country is a different ideological institution from militaries in countries like South Korea or Venezuela or Cuba. You know what I mean? And it's hard to explain outside of the context that I just explained it. We are talking about people who live in countries in which their military exists to protect their countries from imperialist aggression, to protect the people's freedom and democracy from imperialist aggression. The military in this country exists to impose imperialist aggression on other people and to silence us when we oppose this country's imperialist aggression. I hope that makes sense. So until the assembly passed the martial law termination, civil society organizations repeatedly issued statements appealing for disobedience from martial law forces. Citizens outside the assembly physically blocked martial law troops attempting to enter, tearfully appealing for disobedience with pleas to stop. They were urged to not commit crimes against the people by following unlawful orders. There were some citizens who were former special forces veterans, and they appealed for restraint by emphasizing their shared unit background. And lawyers group even distributed templates to the security service for them to justify refusing unjust orders. Like they weren't just saying to people, defect, don't do this. They were giving them the legal framework for this is why legally they can't stop you from refusing unjust orders. You can do it here. See, just walk away. That's organization. That's not just passing something out on social media hoping people are going to show up. That is organization. So when I have said previously, again, I got to say it, when I've said previously, there has not been enough resistance to what has been going on at these federal agencies, this kind of stuff I mean. Of course, people are afraid. Yes, I know that. Yes. But Every people that has had to defend their government and their society and their bodies, their lives against repression like this they've all been afraid. You don't think those people in South Korea were terrified? Yeah, they were, to face off against tanks and riot cops, but they did it anyway. The key is they do it together. They do it together. And they are different. South Koreans are not monolithic. All South Koreans don't think the same way about everything, single thing. South Koreans have different religions. There are South Korean vegans. There are South Korean vegetarians. There are South Korean carnivores. There are South Korean queer people. There are South Korean trans people. There are South Koreans from different ethnic tribes or groups. Yeah, there are differences in South Korean society, and I'm sure that they disagree with each other over certain things. But when it comes to defending their democracy from authoritarianism, no, everybody is just South Korean. Everybody is just South Korean, and we know we don't want that shit. So we know that we are going to have to stop this shit. And they don't sit around and say, well, I'm not going to fuck with y'all because y'all are gay. No, I'm not. I don't want to have anything to do with the alphabet people, because the government gives them more rights than they give us, which is a damn lie. But they didn't waste any time sitting around arguing about what this group of people does and what this group of people doesn't do. It was, this guy is trying to expand his power. He is trying to change the nature of our democracy. He is trying to destroy our democracy. He needs to be stopped. Let's roll. And they did. No, we got to have, we have to explain to people and argue about why we cannot argue with people who hate us. And this is not something as silly as, like some people actually do. Well, you're not a vegetarian. So because, and I literally had somebody tell me this, that because I am Pan-African, but I am not a vegetarian, that I am really not for the liberation of all living things, and my advocacy for the liberation for Africans is invalid and illegitimate because I don't want to liberate animals. I still want to eat them. And I'm just like, okay. Like, if people want to go to that length to find a reason not to organize with someone else, cool. I don't want to organize with you. If you are going to twist yourself into those kinds of intellectual knots in order not to organize, then fuck you. You just don't want to organize. Go on over there and hang out with your people saving sheep. And I like sheep, by the way, not just to eat them. I love them. Sheep they're a mess. Sheep are stupid. Yeah. Yeah. I love them. They're adorable animals and they're great. They're very affectionate too, but they are stupid. Yeah. But I got nothing. And honestly, I'm not opposed to whatever people believe about these kinds of lifestyle things. Queer and trans people, that's not a lifestyle thing. That is who people are. But I also hate that we have to argue with people who we are trying to organize with when we are telling them, look, queer and trans people deserve rights just like everybody else because they're human beings. I don't really care what you think about how they express themselves. That's not your business anyway. They're not asking for your acceptance. They're asking for human rights. They're demanding human rights. And if you're not willing to extend human rights to ensure that all human beings have human rights, then I'm not sure what we have in common. See, there's also that we have to deal with. And then we have to deal with people who we're trying to organize with, build a united front with, who somehow believe that we can have an easier time organizing with the very white supremacist, bigoted, racist, homophobic, sexist, transphobic, xenophobic forces that are creating the situation that people feel like they need to protest, but they don't want to organize to do it. So we've got a weird mental illness going on in society in the United States in general, among the masses specifically, and intensely among the left, where we will argue over bullshit, absolute bullshit. I do not understand why people are as pissed off as they are about trans people just existing. They are not bothering you. They're not. They're not. The trans people existing and demanding not to be discriminated against because they are transgender does not take anything. Do you know my lady parts remained lady parts when trans women were competing in? Yeah. Nothing happened to my ovaries when trans women can compete in sports. You know, nothing. When a trans woman says, I am a woman, my breasts are still breasts. They're still mine. They're still there. There they are. Yep. So I don't understand why y'all are so fucked up about trans people. What they do to you? Nothing. Trans people existing has zero impact on your life. Gay people existing, gay men marrying men, gay women marrying women, no impact on your life whatsoever. When I got married to my husband, when gay people were getting married in DC, we were still married. Nothing happened to my marriage because of gay marriage. I was still hetero married, and we were still hetero, and we were still doing hetero things while the gay people were having their marriage. I've never been able to understand why people get all wrapped up into what other people are doing that nobody is asking you to approve. People are just saying, stop treating me like shit because you don't like what I do. That's all it is. You just really want to reserve the right to treat people like shit. That's it. That's all it is. You can't convince me otherwise. You can't tell me that you are so-called leftist and you hate trans people this much, knowing that trans people are less than, 1% of the population? So you probably don't know any but trans people have gotten you this pissed off that you would align with the fucking right wing because you agree with their perspective on transgender rights infringing upon women's rights. You don't give a shit about women anyway. If you did give a shit about women, you would be telling your male friends to stop being rapists, to stop being fucking sexual predators online. If you cared about women, you would have been talking about the inequality in women's sports that had nothing to do with transgender women competing, but you didn't. If you cared about women, you would be talking about the toxic environment in some left spaces. Oh, I was there in some of the people taking their asses to Standing Rock, treating it like a damn field trip. Excuse me. All these people, and me and Aptus were thinking, because we had started our thing, Lukeman Nation, and we were going, and we were like, hey, maybe we should go, because we want to make sure that we are firsthand journalists, that we go on the scene and we report the thing firsthand. But then we saw how all of the people, so many people on the left, were treating it like a field trip moment. And everybody had to go. Everybody had to go to Standing Rock. And everybody's taking pictures. And so we saw that for what it was. Like, okay, this is a photo op for niggas. All right. We're not going to do it. And then we start to hear the stories about the people doing things that may have been consensual, but we don't know if they were consensual. And then there were accusations made of things that were done that were not consensual. And then people took sides, you know, all the stuff that you hear from people. Oh, trust women. No, people didn't. People did not trust women when they said that certain people raped them, that certain people sexually assaulted them at Standing Rock. I saw it with my own eyes. I saw how these motherfuckers on the left said to these women, oh, he would never do such a thing. You're a liar. Online. And they did it online. They did it all online. And this was on the left. This was the leftists doing this shit. People seriously. And I know that there were some people who were caught up in that stuff where even me and Abdus were like, him? Oh my God. And we really had to decide, are we going to say anything about it? Because we weren't there and we didn't know the details, we decided not to say anything about it. But what we did do was make sure we did not work with any of the people who were implicated in any of it. Any of the accused? Nope. Because we didn't know. And it was too many people who had come out and made accusations. There was too much smoke. And it was like, you know what? I think the best thing for us to do is no, we're not getting involved in that. If these people did it, I think I remember us doing a show and saying something like, if these people who have been accused of these things did these things, they need to pay. We are operating on the belief that the people who have made these accusations are not lying. That is all we're going to say about this. But it's unfortunate that this environment exists on the so-called left. And there was never any, so the left is a mess. We cannot agree on our own basic ass principles. We don't have a problem letting people on the left slander and lie about and smear other people on the left. When people on the left hurt other people, it's not that big a deal. So I'm not sure where we expect anybody to have any kind of who y'all think gonna do who's gonna participate in the general strike when we won't stop arguing with each other over what we put on our plates. Okay. Let me go down. The third item that this article points out that we can learn from what happened there is beware of the next martial law. We suck at that because every 4 years, what did I just say a little while ago? During the Biden administration, we out in the streets. We out in the damn streets all the damn time. We out in the streets telling you this is fascism. This is authoritarianism. This is a violation of human rights. This is illegal. This is wrong. This man is the devil. Democrats hate you. Where are y'all? Well, we're telling you, look, this is bad. If you think Trump he's just going to do what this man has been doing and only going to do it worse. So you might as well start organizing now. You didn't. We told you it was coming. We told you it was coming because where we were was already horrible. And you didn't listen. So of course you couldn't beware of the next martial law because you didn't acknowledge the moment we were in 4 years ago. But the article here says that although the National Assembly passed a resolution demanding the lifting of martial law, it took approximately 4 hours until the president actually lifted it. During this time, people maintained their position in front of the National Assembly, preparing for the possibility that the president might reject the Assembly's demand. According to a government investigation that followed, President Yoon allegedly issued directives to enter the National Assembly main chamber by force, including the use of firearms if necessary to remove the members. Furthermore, it was revealed that he instructed the military to continue with the operation regardless of the martial law being lifted, as it could be declared 2 or 3 more times if needed. While the first coup attempt ended in failure after 6 hours, citizens remained anxious about the coup forces continuing to occupy key government positions. As soon as dawn broke on December 4, which means the people stayed where they were all night long because they did not trust the martial law forces still being in place. So as soon as dawn broke on December 4, civil society organizations across the country began issuing statements and holding press conferences throughout the day, demanding the president's arrest, resignation, and parliamentary impeachment. The opposition party announced their intention to file criminal complaints against the president and the Minister of Defense for insurrection and to pursue impeachment. The Secretary General of the National Assembly issued measures completely prohibiting the entry of Defense Ministry staff and police officers into the Assembly building. Many opposition members of Parliament, including the Assembly Speaker, stayed within the Parliament building for about a week, rather than returning home or to an official residence, preparing for contingencies such as abduction. Civil society organizations held large-scale daily protests in front of the National Assembly to protect the parliamentarians, while simultaneously pressuring the Assembly to swiftly pass the presidential impeachment motion. On December 14th, 10 days later, as the National Assembly passed the impeachment motion, over 1 million people turned out for the mass demonstration. They shifted from the National Assembly to the vicinity of the presidential residence and the Constitutional Court, continuing to demand the president's arrest and urging the Constitutional Court to expedite its impeachment deliberations. That is not only organization, folks. That is organization and coordination at every level of civil society. All of the civil organizations across the entire country organized and coordinated among themselves, and they coordinated with the politicians in the opposition party who had barricaded themselves in the National Assembly to stop the coup. We don't have such a party in this country to coordinate with. Okay. Let me see what you all are saying over there in the chat. Hello, how are you, everybody? Thank you for joining me. Yes, Alex, Lady Alex, there is an increase in measles. Yep. But there has been for a long time, and we're gonna talk about that at another time. So let me get to the fourth item that they identified that we can learn from. Create festive, diverse forms of resistance. This is very interesting, but I think it's very, very informative. As large-scale demonstrations continue daily in front of the National Assembly, organizing the crowds became the primary consideration. Notably, light sticks emerged as a new symbol of mass protest, replacing the traditional candlelight. While candlelight maintains a somewhat solemn atmosphere, light sticks at the protest created an ambiance reminiscent of K-pop concerts, where they are often used by fans to cheer for their favorite idols. Now, look, K-pop is a whole phenomenon in Korea that is easily translated into society in different ways because it is such a huge societal phenomenon. I'm not so sure that we have such a thing, an equivalent thing in this country. And don't y'all dare say that Super Bowl performance, because if you do, ugh. Anyway, They created remarkable synergy at the protests when combined with hit songs that were sung as protest chants. Again, I don't know that we have anything similar in the United States. I think it's a shame that Macklemore's protest music is actual protest music and Kendrick Lamar's is not. But okay, let me go down. This played a crucial role in attracting younger generations who comprise the K-pop idol fan base, and they are rabid, the K-pop fans. Oh my gosh. The Beehive has nothing on K-pop fans. I really think that, yeah. Another characteristic feature of South Korean mass protests is food sharing, which we don't do that here. We are getting better at it, but we don't do that as well here, which has evolved significantly, they say in the article, with participants prepaying for dozens or hundreds of cups of coffee, beverages, various snacks, and meals at nearby cafes and restaurants, or sending coffee and snack trucks to protest sites. The rallies were basically structured like festivals, featuring various musicians and artists. Speeches were limited to 2 minutes each, with pre-registered free speech sessions, ensuring that participants had an opportunity to share their perspectives with the crowds. This is key. This is the most important part. That other stuff is cute. I don't know that we have a similar cultural environment here in the United States to do that type of thing with a mass protest. But here is the part that I think is the most important, that we also don't have, but we can work on it. Many other groups participated. Unions for metal workers, railway workers, and transport workers went on strike and held demonstrations at local ruling party offices and the offices of parliamentarians who refused to cooperate with the impeachment motion. History teachers created and distributed educational materials as teaching resources. There was a 34-page PowerPoint presentation that was distributed online that was structured in 4 sections: the nature of martial law, historical cases of martial law in South Korea, problematic aspects of the December 3rd Martial Law Declaration, and the creation of slogans for protests and collective actions. It was designed by teachers for immediate classroom implementation. The Korean Confederation of Trade Unions developed a website facilitating easy transmission of text messages to anti-impeachment parliamentarians. Why does this matter? Because that website helped protesters send thousands of text messages to those anti-impeachment politicians' mobile phones, rendering their phones unusable because of the overwhelming volume of incoming messages, so they couldn't coordinate a counter response to the people's stopping of the coup. Now, we talked a few minutes ago about how labor unions in the US are not led by radical elements any longer. Ever since the long attack on labor unions and the attacks against anti-communism, or the attacks against communism, the US government calling everything communism for decades. So many labor unions today are not agitating for much these days, compared to labor leaders of the past who connected US militarism with the exploitation of workers and the theft of their wages. Established labor unions like the AFL-CIO should not be expected today to join in any mass action against the US government in any way because they are reformists. There's a reason we call the AFL-CIO the AFL-CIA. They are reformists who work within the guardrails of the current exploitative system. They do not want to change it. They just want a little bit of a raise and a few better benefits for their union members. They do not want an end to military. You understand? Also, teachers are under attack in this country over curriculum that they can and cannot teach. While there's been some amazing teacher organizing in the past few years here that has produced some great wins for teachers and students, to expect teachers to create and distribute the kind of propaganda that was created in South Korea, that 34-page PowerPoint document, to educate the people in this way, that's a stretch. I don't think that's going to happen in the near term, not because they're incapable of doing it or that they just will not, but because in order to get teachers involved, they have to be involved in organizations that would guide them to do this. And their teachers' unions, didn't we just say that unions in this country are not run by radicals? They're not doing radical organizing work. So teachers' unions are not involved in radical organizing. They are involved in organizing for teachers, better pay for teachers, better benefits for teachers, but not organizing to address any of the larger social ills that the students that these teachers have to teach also have to deal with. So who among the technological class then will create a tool that renders the technology of the coup plotters ineffective so the people can organize effectively against them when all the tech class in this country are capitalists and inclined toward fascism to protect their class and their profits? I mean, because they already sell our data. They have already sold all of our data to all of the government agencies. Who among them will use their technology to stop an internal coup when their technology is already used to collect data from users, to target troublemakers or people who oppose the capitalist status quo? So, let me go down. Oh, I don't know how this got here twice. Oh, I was getting too carried away with my notes here. Excuse me. Wow. So following the failure of this 6-hour attempted self-coup, South Korean social movement organizations initially concentrated their efforts on pursuing presidential impeachment through the National Assembly, followed by demands for the president's arrest. Currently, they're campaigning for the Constitutional Court to deliver a final verdict for the president's dismissal. To this end, on December 11th, an umbrella organization called Emergency Action for Yoon Out and Social Reform was established by 1,550 civil society groups. 1,550 civil society organizations got together and formed this big ass coalition called Emergency Action for Yoon Out and Social Reform. These 1,500 plus civil society organizations, they had to exist before this happened in order to, and most of them did. South Korean social movements, drawing from their experience of successfully impeaching President Park Geun-hye just 8 years ago, say it again, South Korean social movements drawing from their experience of successfully impeaching President Park Geun-hye just 8 years ago, shared the assessment that their previous achievement was limited to merely shifting political power from conservatives to liberals. I'm fitting to shout. Therefore, this new umbrella organization set its objectives beyond the immediate resignation of the president. It's aiming to establish the 7th Republic of Korea that would achieve comprehensive social reforms through public discourse. Listen, one-day boycotts are fine if the outcome is intended to be very limited in impact and scope, right? If a change in society, though, is what you want, then a one-day boycott is not going to do it. And honestly, even if the goal of the one-day boycott was to teach Target a lesson, I don't know what the lesson is. I don't know. I'm just saying. Not spending our money at Target for one day is not going to teach Target a lesson, because Target makes a lot of money from a lot of different places that doesn't have anything to do with us. So as much as they say, oh, that we would hate to lose the Black consumer, but they don't care. They don't care because they make enough money from wherever else and everywhere else in the world. Remember, we have to understand these are not domestic only countries. Target doesn't care if Black people in this country don't buy their shit, because Target is a it's a global country. It is a company, might as well be a country. Target is a global company. They have stores all over the world. People all over the world buy shit from Target and Walmart and Amazon and all of these major corporations. They don't care. All of this thinking that you all have about the power we have with our dollar, let that go. Please let that go. Because societal change requires a few things. One of them is an honest analysis of our current conditions. Another is an acknowledgement of historical progress and what and who caused it, as well as who benefited from it and who didn't. And a clear vision for the future and what will that mean for the masses. We need to be asking and answering all of those questions very honestly. If societal change is what we want. Now, if we just want to make ourselves feel good in saying that, oh, we participated in some public action for the first time, yeah, okay, I guess that's all right. But what does it change, right? This is the question that I'm not getting an answer to for this one-day boycott. What did it change? Tomorrow, when we listen to the news and read the news and they say Target lost $30 billion, which they're not going to lose that much money. It's not. But let's just say tomorrow, the news that Target lost $30 billion as a result of the one-day boycott that was called on social media. The Black community boycotted Target. The Black community's voice was heard. Target issues a statement. The Black community boycotted us, cost us to lose $30 billion. We recognize the value of the Black community to our bottom line. Your voice is heard. We're reinstituting DEI. Is that what you wanted? Is that what you were doing a one-day boycott for? For them to re-implement that bullshit program that actually did not help Black people, not Black consumers, not Black people who are not trying to work for Target. And even the Black people who were trying to work for Target didn't get helped by DEI all that much. Now, look, DEI is much bigger than just making sure that the workplace is more equitable and fair for Black people. DEI also covers ensuring the workplace is accessible for disabled people, mothers, all of that. Yeah, that there are technologies that people who are hard of hearing or who have impaired vision can participate in the workplace. DEI covers all of that. It's the bigots who make it just about Black people. But then on the other hand, it's Black folks who do not understand that We don't benefit from DEI. So while something is needed to address the racial inequalities we still experience, when the people who run the DEI programs are mostly white and they end up hiring mostly white people through the DEI programs, how are you not analyzing that as a problem with the DEI programs, which would lead you to say, okay, we don't want the DEI programs re-implemented. Not those, not like that. Nope, no. We need something different. We need something entirely different, right? But if that is the goal of the one-day boycott, let's say that happens. Let's say that happens. Target is pushed to re-implement its DEI programs because the Black people showed Target how much power we had. What does the re-implementation of Target's DEI program do for you? Me, your mama and them, your auntie and your uncle and them, your cousins and them. What? See, so one-day boycotts are fine if the outcome is intended to be very limited in impact and scope. So what does that mean for us to achieve this? Oops, wait a minute. Oh, gotta go down, down, down. Oh, excuse me. Let me go down to the end of this thing. Here we go. In South Korea, the article ends, and I'm going to give you a link to this article. The prevention of a self-coup, which could have easily succeeded given the mobilization of martial law forces, was achieved through swift action based on identifying methods to lift martial law within the existing system. Had the coup succeeded that day, reversing the subsequent dictatorial situation would have been far more challenging. You can't respond swiftly if you are not organized at all. You cannot respond to anything swiftly if you are not organized and trained toward responding at all. The dangers of the moment are still real, they say. Since the president's arrest on January 26th, he was arrested just last month. The situation has grown more complex with signs of far-right mobilization. South Korea has entered a prolonged struggle to strengthen its imperfect democracy, but its example should provide inspiration to all, including Americans, especially Americans, even as South Koreans work to defend and expand upon their recent victory. When we leftists analyze people's movements in different countries, like I said, we try to be careful not to say things like what we in the US should do is what these people in other countries did. We don't do that, because we understand that the material and political realities that people in other countries live in are different from ours. For example, as I stated earlier, as we talked about that, went through that article, public education in South Korea is different from public education here. As far as I know, there's no movement in South Korea to stop teaching some aspects of history because some people are offended by it. And that history itself is different from the history of the US, which I don't think people understand is incredibly important in talking about how we organize compared to how people in other countries do. Because South Korea doesn't have the history of settler colonial genocide, African or any other human trafficking, systematized torture, rape, murder, mob murders of citizens. Masses and mobs of citizens running around committing riots and murders against groups of people, racialized groups of people, legitimized police and military violence against citizens. That's all whitewashed or lied about or lionized as the necessary actions that needed to be taken against communists or lazy Americans who want a handout, who are influenced by communists to oppose the US government. And look, I'm not saying that they're perfect in South Korea or in any other country. I'm saying that their society and the people in that society have a different relationship with their society, with their government, and with each other than we do because of the different origin processes. What we see in a lot of countries, or what I see in a lot of countries that are still actively opposed to and fighting US imperialism today, is that the people are more aware of their history than we are of ours. We also see that people in some of these countries certainly love their countries. So patriotism is not a uniquely American thing. People in this country like for you to believe that Americans are the only people in the world who love their countries. But you visit Cuba and you ask Cubans how they feel about Cuba. You better not say some slick shit about Cuba to a Cuban in Cuba. And I mean about Fidel Castro. I mean about the revolutionary government. Now, you ask them gusanos down in Miami about the revolution, yeah, they're going to say some imperialist shit. Oh, the Castro was the dictator, blah, blah, blah. But they are the descendants of the plantation owners who were exploiting the people with the U.S. government and the U.S. mob through the casinos. But what is uniquely American, or maybe uniquely Western, I think, is the idea that we individually are Americans rather than the idea that we belong to a people in America, right? This attitude that people in other countries have that connects them, like the attitude that people in other countries have where they feel like they are connected to a people of that country and not just connected to the country, seems like, in my opinion, it kind of comes from that history that people in other countries have of struggle against outside forces that colonized and oppressed them, and their collective struggle and triumph over that to establish their societies as they exist today. So they are still defending their societies, their countries, their literal freedom against imperialist attacks that continue. But the people in those countries see their struggle against outside aggression as a struggle against not just their country, but as their people, and against the right of their people to exist however they collectively choose to, not just an attack against their country or a leader, right? So those people's identity is not connected to like their country's military dominance of other countries or people like Americans are. This is why we have military ads being shown at NFL games that are, on NFL games that are broadcast on television. And they show those ads on the Jumbotrons at all of the stadiums when they have the timeouts. Yeah, they do. That's why we have military flyovers at football games and baseball games. That's why we have all this support the troops rhetoric, but the government doesn't actually support the troops because veteran suicide and veteran homelessness are things. Veteran mental illness that is not treated, a thing, because the government doesn't give a damn about the troops. The government wants to use the troops to suppress and subdue other countries. Doesn't give a damn about the people who they make do it. So our identity or our sense of patriotism. Oh, that's a good comment, right? Oh, woo, let me finish my thought and get to that. Americans' understanding of patriotism, I feel like, is rooted in militarism. It is rooted in the so-called success and the prowess and the power and the might and the lethality. That's the new favorite word for the U.S. to use in context of the U.S. military. I feel like that is what the American understanding of patriotism is. Not that, you are proud of the accomplishments of your country in the development of your society and the development of the people in your society because of your country's commitment to the development of its people, but you're proud of America because the military has killed so many people around the world and dominated and subdued so many countries around the world and has gotten rich off of stealing their resources in that manner. That is what American patriotism is based on, from my assessment. It's based on the success of genocide, the success of slavery. These people understand that the genocide of the indigenous and the enslavement of Africans was awful. They understand that was evil. And they don't care because they benefited from it. America progressed because of it. So American patriotism is quite literally grounded in the ends of Americans, and white Americans specifically, benefiting from other people's oppression justifies the means of that success. So if we have to oppress you and murder you in order for white Americans to be successful and prosper, then so be it. Proud to be an American. That is not what most other people in the world are proud of their countries for, because most other countries in the world, if they're not European, most other countries and the world around the world do not have that kind of history, don't have that kind of relationship with other countries around the world. Their militaries do not operate that way. So for people in other countries, in some other countries, their patriotism really is what patriotism is supposed to be. I am proud of my country because look at what we have overcome. And look at how we take care of our people. Look at the advances we have made for the benefit of all of our people. I'm proud of the progress our country has made in being a good citizen of the world. And not only caring for our people, but helping others when they need. Yeah, that's a great patriotism. We cannot claim that in this country. That's not what patriotism in America is about at all. Patriotism in America is all about military domination. So it seems to me that people who have been victims of brutal imperialism and colonialism, like Korea, Cuba, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Nicaragua, throughout the global South, base their identity in their collective struggle for freedom from domination by capitalist forces who use military might to impose that control on other countries. That is literally my ghetto definition of imperialism, what I just said. Now, do they have to deal with differences or divisions among themselves? Of course they do. Yeah, they do. But they don't seem to let those differences stop them from coming together in defense of their entire population against neocolonial or imperialist forces. In the US, the ways we are different are used by those capitalist dictatorship forces to keep us convinced that we have nothing in common. So we don't work together. And they don't even have to try real hard anymore. They actually don't have to do anything to keep us separated. We do it ourselves in the ways that I talked about a few minutes ago. And while we do it for them, they watch us fight each other instead of them, while they steal all of our wages, all of our rights, all of our freedom, and eventually our lives. While we're down here fighting each other over not wanting trans kids to use the bathroom in peace, calling being politically aware of what's going on woke a negative and insidious, dangerous thing, still claiming that unqualified Black folks are given jobs we don't deserve through affirmative action and DEI, fear-mongering over immigrants fleeing from U.S. destabilizing their countries, making heroes out of right-wing psychopaths who claim they don't want to spend any money on war, but who also hate equal rights for Blacks, immigrants, gays, trans people, The capitalist dictators stoke these divisions with their rhetoric. We pick it up, run farther with it, and attack other people. They tell us to, who we should be uniting with to fight them. The problem with this moment, I think, is that people are trying to start from square one against a system that has refined itself in this country for almost 400 years, because people don't want to listen to or work with the people who've been trying to organize the masses against this system all along. And they're doing it through a consumerist perspective, not a people-centered human rights perspective, not a workers' collective's perspective. No, but people are acting as if the only power you have is to stop spending money for a day or a couple of days or a week or a month. And as good as that might be for some small things, that's not going to move anything in a problem that's not economic in nature. And it will not facilitate any larger changes in wider society, even if one company does have a change of heart. But we're still not sure what the demand is in this boycott. So I don't even know what a company's change of heart would be. What would that be? I don't know. Change from and to what? It wasn't made clear. And in that way, I think that companies are looking at this boycott and they're like, they ain't serious. These people are not serious. Just fuck them. You know, don't pay any attention to them. They are not serious. We have much more power than that. We do. All we have to do is join an anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, international solidarity-focused grassroots organization that's preferably Pan-African, and learn to do a lot more than a one-day economic boycott. But we're indoctrinated against doing that. Decades of government and capitalist repression against organizers and organizations have ensured that you will always believe that the only way to change anything is to work within the existing framework and make the most undisruptive action possible, claiming that you're trying to make a point or make a change or make an impact, and you're not. Action that does not require meetings. This is what you all want to do. Actions that don't require meetings, don't require planning, don't require securing alternatives and creating schedules and doing actual work. Action that doesn't require leaving your house, being physically or emotionally or intellectually or politically uncomfortable, out in the elements, being too hot, being too cold, being wet, being out in public demonstrations and possibly being met with riot police. Action that doesn't get condemned by US politicians, actions that don't get you smeared as a foreign agent, actions that don't get you criticized for being too radical. You want to participate in actions that don't represent any risk to you whatsoever, that you don't have to engage with other people to carry out, that aren't going to impact many other people when it's done, even if it's successful, because the markers for success are either non-existent or so low and limited that nothing actually does change. So that's where we are right now. That's where we've been in this country for a long time. How do we change this? We keep organizing. We keep doing this. We keep talking about this. We keep explaining it. We do the demonstrations. We do the teach-ins. We do the webinars. And we make the appeal. And every event, every conversation, every outreach event, everything we do, one or two people joins an organization. That's how it's done. That is the only way it is done. So, thanks. I know Kim is on, and I want to get off because I don't want to take up a whole lot from her show, but I wanted to get back to this comment right here. Thank you, Yipper, for that. American Gods was not only one of my favorite shows because it deals with old societal gods, what are called the old gods, before people's faith, before Christianity. people believing in the old gods. So what some people call the pagan gods. I don't think they're so much pagan as just they're from an iteration of civilization before the one where Christianity came about. And the old gods are fighting for relevance. They have become irrelevant because people have stopped believing in them, not necessarily because of Christianity, just because of, the progression of society, whatever. So some of the old gods are kind of nasty, and they're kind of tricksy, and you can't trust them, and they're not always so nice with the believers, and in advocating for people renewing their belief in them, they do some pretty heinous things. So on the one hand, it's like, yeah, you're looking at the old gods making a legitimate kind of argument for fighting against their obsolescence, right? But the way they go about fighting against their obsolescence is to just be psychopathic dicks and to kill a bunch of people. And that's how you make people believe in them. And I hope that is what you were talking about when this reminds you of American Gods, because that's exactly, oh my God, that's exactly the kind of attitude that this country and the way it kind of deals with patriotism. That's exactly what they do. It's like they're so afraid of America becoming irrelevant. The people not looking up to America. Oh, America is not the authority anymore. And instead of engaging in international solidarity and being good global citizens and being nice to people and, building bridges and hospitals and schools and just doing that and not eradicating people's native crops and forcing them to buy American grain that is not as good quality as their native food, which is why people in other countries are experiencing hunger now that USAID shipments and funding has been curtailed. We have to ask ourselves why other countries with plenty of land to farm need American food aid. Why can't they grow their own food? Because the US government won't let them. Because the US government has colonized their food system and has criminalized them using their own native farming, native seeds, and has forced them into surviving on US corporate food sources. So instead of the United States addressing its fear of becoming irrelevant and disrespected and nobody believing in it and everybody in the world hating it, instead of the United States saying, well, let me sow some goodwill in the world, and that's how people are going to look at us differently and want to hang out with the US more. Instead, what does the US do? The US acts like a psychopathic old god and just runs around killing people, expecting people to turn around and then say, oh, we're in so much trouble, please help us, the United States. But everybody else in the world understands that it's the US who is killing them, so they're not going to ask the people who are killing them to help them, which is the problem with the old gods. The way they're trying in the series American Gods, the way they're trying to regain their relevance or hold on to their relevance is exactly the way the US is trying to hold on to its relevance, through unconscionable violence and domination. You cannot fight and defeat a force such as that through a one-day economic boycott. There is not a point that you can make to such a force that they are going to listen to or respect. They don't give a damn. They, meaning the capitalist dictatorship that is this system, does not give a damn about any so-called Black buying power. We don't have any. And even if we did, they wouldn't care. because they don't have as much money as we don't have as much money as they do, because they stole all of ours. They know we don't have as much money as they do. So economically, what can we do to them? Ourselves. But if we organized with other people, if we organized with Koreans, with Venezuelans, with Cubans, with folks on the continent, with folks in the AES, with folks in Sudan, if we organized with the Eritreans, if we organized with the Nicaraguans, if we organized with the Haitians, and if we stayed the fuck away from the right wing that hates all of those people and got together and hammered out some principles of unity and some codes of conduct and a set of concrete demands that would improve the lives of all of our people, and to struggle against this capitalist system to overturn it and build a socialist system of our making, for our purposes, for our people, that is the only way we are going to win. Organizing is the only way to win. Organizing is the only way to win. That's all I got for tonight. Thank you all so much. Appreciate you. Hope you had a good weekend. Hope you are planning to have a good weekend. Hope you've had a great week. Be really good to each other. Be really good to yourselves. A luta continua. The struggle does continue. But damn it, join an organization. Join an organization today. Join an organization. Before this boycott is over, go to somebody's website. Join an organization. Jesus Christ. If you want to win, that is what you must do. And if you do that, victory is certain. Victory is certain. Victoria asserta. If you are willing to fight for it, because you're going to have to.